There are a lot of great things that the US has done and is doing right now, but there are also a lot of problems with this country and how we run it. The list could go on and on, really, but for now let's focus on one. The US is known for its rich and substantial agricultural history and industry. Ever since we first colonized America, our population has grown to over 318.9 million people. That's a lot of mouths to feed. Our agriculture has had to keep up with the food demand of the growing population in the US. This meant that farmers had to find certain techniques in order to help provide for the huge amount of people to feed. This led them to introduce chemicals such as commercial pesticides and fertilizers into the growing of crops in agriculture. While they may be beneficial to help the growing of crops, their effects elsewhere can be very detrimental. Only a portion of the fertilizer being used is being utilized by the plants to produce and help them grow. The other part is accumulated in the soil or escapes as runoff. This runoff can cause many bad effects to occur in the environment. The first negative effect of fertilizer runoff is the cause of the eutrophication of bodies of water. This process makes lakes, rivers, oceans, and such so rich in nutrients that a dense plant population grows. This then depletes the amount of oxygen in the water and can kill other aquatic life. Also, toxins can be produced that can wreak havoc on eukaryotic cellular machinery, resulting in rapid death not only to the organism, but the eukaryotic organisms that consume it. For example, the toxins can be absorbed by plants, which are consumed by fish, which are eaten by more fish. If humans drink the water or eat any of the above, the minute amounts of toxins would be all that's required to pass down and can cause acute liver failure in humans. The second negative effect of fertilizer runoff is the fact that the nitrogen-rich compounds found in fertilizer runoff are the primary cause of serious oxygen depletion in many parts of oceans, especially in coastal zones, lakes, and rivers. The resulting lack of dissolved oxygen greatly reduces the ability of these areas to sustain oceanic wildlife, and it may take decades before the accumulated nitrates in the water can be broken down by natural processes. The third negative effect of fertilizer runoff is that greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide are produced during the manufacturing of most fertilizers. Also, methane emissions from crop fields have increased by the application of ammonium-based fertilizers. These emissions contribute to global climate change as methane is a potent greenhouse gas, and through the increasing use of nitrogen fertilizer, which was used at a rate of 110 million tons per year in 2012, adding to the already existing amount of reactive nitrogen, nitrous oxide has become the third most important greenhouse gas after carbon dioxide and methane. It has a global warming potential 296 times larger than the equal mass of carbon dioxide, and it also contributes to stratospheric ozone depletion. And lastly, the use of some fertilizers can lead to the acidity growth in some soils. Some fertilizers have been known to hurt livestock that feed where they have been placed, and it's expensive to produce and buy fertilizers. For pesticides, there can be costs to the environment, costs to human health, as well as costs to the development and research of new pesticides. The first problem with pesticides is that they can cause acute and delayed health effects in people who are exposed. Pesticide exposure can cause a variety of adverse health effects, ranging from simple irritation of the skin and eyes to more severe effects such as affecting the nervous system, mimicking hormones causing reproductive problems, and also causing cancer. It has been said that neurological defects, birth defects, fetal death, and neurodevelopmental disorders have been the result of pesticide use. The World Health Organization estimates that each year around 3 million workers in agriculture in the developing world experience severe poisoning from pesticides, about 18,000 of which can die. Second, pesticide use raises a number of environmental concerns with the killing of organisms. Over 98% of sprayed insecticides and 95% of herbicides reach a destination other than their target species through the air, water, and soil. It has been said that this is the reason for the bee disappearance, because these insecticides have been affecting a non-target species. This is very bad, as bees are one of the greatest pollinators in the animal world, and without them many of our plants and crop foods will die. This has been very bad for the environment, as plants and animals can be killed easily and quickly even though they are not targeted or even close to where it has been sprayed. Furthermore, pests can develop a resistance to the pesticide, which would then require farmers to get a new pesticide. Alternatively, a greater dose of the pesticide can be used to counteract the resistance, although this will cause a worsening of the ambient pollution problem. The third problem with pesticide use is that biological modification can occur, which is the process where pesticides are more concentrated at each level in the food chain. This happens when pesticides work their way into rivers or lakes and are eaten by aquatic organisms such as fish, which in turn are eaten by more fish, large birds, other animals, or humans. The substances become concentrated in tissues or internal organs as they move up in the food chain and cannot be easily excreted from the organisms and thus stay in them. Lastly, the costs of these pesticides are a great negative effect of pesticide use. The human health and environmental cost from pesticides in the United States is estimated at $9.6 billion. Additional costs include the registration process and the cost of purchasing pesticides. The registration process can take several years to complete with up to 70 types of field tests and can cost $50 to $70 million for a single pesticide. Annually, the United States spends $10 billion on pesticides. Lastly, pesticide use reduces biodiversity, contributes to pollinator decline, destroys habitat, threatens endangered species, causes water pollution, is a persistent organic pollutant, and contributes to soil contamination. Now, to change these problems existing, I have come up with a simple yet effective solution to this chemical use in agriculture problem. It starts with you. Households will collect their food and yard waste every week and bring them out to the curb in a container, just as you would do with trash and recyclables. This food and yard waste will then be taken to a center such as trash and recyclables would, where it will be sorted through. It will then be placed into different composting piles where it will decompose and get ready to be used in agriculture. Once the compost pile is ready, it will be shipped out to farms within the state it's in and be placed with the soil of the growing crops or even in the fields of grazing livestock. It can also be used by the citizens for use in their gardens, yards, and such as well. And all of this compost, since the processes would be paid through the government like trash and recycling is, will be free to farmers and citizens. The compost will be a substitute for fertilizers, since the use of fertilizers are to bring nutrients back into the soil for plants to continue to grow as they take nutrients out of the soil. Unnatural fertilizers, however, have a very bad effect on the environment, and these composts will provide a more natural way for these plants to receive the nutrients that they need. This will also be a substitute for insecticides because the bugs and pests will be drawn to the compost instead of the crops, mostly because of the smell. The bugs and pests will then want to feed on the compost rather than hurting and destroying the crops that they could feed on. The compost will be able to replace herbicides because it can be sanitized before it's shipped off to prevent plant diseases and soil-borne illnesses. Also, it can be put on top of the soil to cover and kill any weeds. Moreover, it would also allow for food and yard waste to have an actual use instead of just rotting in the dump. And compost can enhance soil structure, improve nutrient holding and moisture retention powers in soil, improves soil fertility and tilth, increases the population of beneficial microorganisms and decomposers in the soil, helps promote plant establishment, helps suppress soil-borne illnesses and plant diseases, prevents erosion, safeguards water quality, and destroys pathogens or unwanted seeds in the soil. All of these processes can be very beneficial to farmers and citizens alike, as the soil can be much better and it saves them money as they don't need to pay for fertilizers or pesticides anymore. And they can save money on water as the soil now has better water retention. And now I interviewed Dr. Goodman from Trumbull's Agri-Science Department to answer some questions on my subject.
Absolutely. Commercial fertilizers actually provide, there's a range of them, the amount of nitrogen, the amount of phosphorus in commercial fertilizers. So some of them are like super intense, so you have a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus and the nutrients that plants need. So like in a way, if you want to apply something that's like really packed with what plants need, commercial fertilizers will do a better job. And you know what's in there or how much the ratios are of the different nutrients. But commercial fertilizers are very energy intensive to manufacture in the first place. They require a lot of energy, which contributes to global warming. For one thing, that's a really bad aspect of fertilizers that a lot of people don't ever even think about, like making them in the first place. And then of course, they're so heavy in the nutrients that plants need that the plants don't necessarily use all of it.
Yeah.
So that's when you get your runoff into waterways, which then stimulates algae growth. And the algae in waterways will use up all the oxygen. And so big this has affected not just small waterways and rivers and big rivers like the Mississippi, but even large parts of the ocean where like the Gulf of Mexico is a huge, part of the ocean, and the amount of life in the Gulf of Mexico is much lower than it used to be.
Yeah.
It's a remarkable impact on ocean, not enough oxygen in the water. So, yeah, and especially like right at the mouth of the Mississippi, that's like a huge dead zone in the.
Especially
in the
since the like Mississippi, the beginning of it starts where all like there's like so many farms and such
Exactly.
in that area.
Right. So to answer your question, that was a long answer.
That's fine.
And the short answer is that your idea to use compost would be so much better. I mean, I have compost at home, and I have a vegetable garden, and I use the compost on my lawn and the vegetable garden. It it's just me making the compost, so it's my family. I mean, it's not a lot, but it takes a little bit of work. It's aside from just letting it decompose in one place, generally to spread it, to have something that can be spread nicely. It has to kind of be, it gets clumpy and stuff, so I have a screen that I kind of screen it, like, to make it into smaller pieces. And the other problem with compost to actually think about is the seeds don't decompose as readily as the green parts or the food parts, like so I have found, like, if I use our town compost on my garden, I get an unbelievable crop of weeds because the seeds aren't breaking down in the compost. So that's something to consider when you're thinking about compost. And if you're composting manure, the same thing. Like, cow manure is great because they're ungulates and they have the 4 different chambers in their stomachs and they do digest everything. But like horses, the manure is full of seeds.
I heard there was like I read that there was a type of fertilizer, or not fertilizer, compost that you can apply like heat to it and it will like destroy the seeds.
Yes, so that would be
without
great,
like getting rid of the energy from the compost.
That would be a great thing to do if you're like sort of mass producing compost, to have that as like pasteurizing milk. You could heat your compost and kill the viable seeds.
Yeah,
that would be a very good solution to that. I think it's one of those great ideas. I think it's a great idea, and I think it could work. I mean, in an ideal world, it could work. I think it's one of those things where you start in a Berkeley or something like that, where people want to do this anyway, and you show that it can work on a small scale, first in a town, for example, and then it could, from there, then you get other towns copying and providing the surrounding farms with the compost. So you get sort of an urban area to do it, where people live close together. So it's not so much, you get more compost because people live close together, and it can be collected without driving that far, right? And collected all in like an urban or suburban area. You have your compost area, and then that provides the compost for the surrounding farms. And I can, see what the success was on sort of a smaller scale, initially. But I think it's great. I think it's a great idea. So, I mean, we those of us that do it on our own little minute scales, with our vegetable garden and our compost, it works. Why not? In my town, we have compost. All the yard waste is composted in the town dump, what they call the something center. Anyway, we all call it the town dump, and anyone can go pick up the compost when they want it, if they have a sort of a container, something to put it in, a pickup truck or something. Anyone can get the compost from the town compost. So there are towns that kind of do it on that scale, like within the town. No one's taking that compost to the surrounding farms. That would be a really great next step for a town like. So I'm in Hamden, so we, all the yard waste, all the yeah, it's mostly basically yard waste from residents and the town land, like the town parks and stuff, ends up at the dump in compost piles, and then it's made available to everyone. I mean, that takes years and years to decompose, but you're collecting over years and years, so it just, someone has to manage. You can't just keep dumping it in the same place, because then you have old and new. So someone manages what part is getting the new stuff and what part is sitting there for 5 years, and the stuff that's been there for many years is what is available for people to come use and pick up. And it's very rich, wonderful stuff. Got some garbage in there, but because it's like, everyone's throwing whatever. But most people are good about it. Most people don't put plastic and stuff in there, and it works. But there's no person taking that and delivering it to like farms.
Yeah. And it would be much better just like the compost sitting at the dump and like food and yard waste sitting at the dump than like if it would actually have a use.
Exactly. Yeah. So that would be great. And I think there's no reason that wouldn't work. So